I'm Hazel Thornton. I'm 78 years old, and the morning the sun spilled through my kitchen window, I felt something I hadn't in years. The calm I used to beg for when life was louder, the smell of salt in the air, the distant call of a gull over the surf. This little white cottage 3 blocks from the Gulf holds everything I need now. But it took me nearly losing myself to find it before I go any further. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to start over when no one thought you could. 5 years ago, I buried my husband Edgar after 49 years of marriage. I stood in our kitchen on Cypress Street, alone, staring at the coffee cups we used every morning for decades. They still sat on the shelf side by side like they were waiting for him to walk in. He never did, for a long time. I moved through the house like a visitor, brushing past picture frames, bumping into memories I didn't want to relive. Bennett, our only son, came. By twice a week, always checking his watch, always with a face that said he'd rather be anywhere else. And Piper, his wife, well, she didn't even pretend. 3 months after the funeral, Piper stirred her tea and looked at me over the rim like she was already bored. "Hazel, maybe it's time to look at nursing homes," she said. Just like that. Not Mama, not Mrs. Thornton. Just Hazel, like we'd only just met in line at the grocery store. I didn't answer. I couldn't. She'd never liked how I folded towels or seasoned a roast. And now she didn't like how I mourned either. What broke me wasn't their words. It was a photograph, an old one I found in the garage tucked behind boxes of Edgar's books. It was the 2 of us on the beach in Gulfport the year before. Bennett was born, barefoot, laughing with salt in our hair. We had written a promise in the sand, then said one day we'd live by the water. The next morning, I called a realtor when I told Bennett I was selling the house he grew up in to buy a small cottage by the sea. His voice turned sharp. "You're doing this without talking to us first," he said, like I was a child, not a woman who'd worked 40 years behind a pharmacy counter, who'd paid for braces and textbooks and Bennett's first used car. Piper didn't hide her disapproval either. "Hazel, don't you think that money would be better spent on Iris's education or invested in Bennett's business?" she said over Sunday lunch. Iris just kept tapping at her phone like she wasn't part of the conversation. They saw my savings as a family asset, something they were owed for being related to me. Still, I packed up my things, sold the house, and bought my white cottage with blue shutters and a narrow garden out back. I planted lavender along the fence and put a rocking chair on the front porch. It was quiet here, the kind of quiet that heals for a while. The sound of gulls and the rhythm of the tide were enough. I read books I never had time for. Walked barefoot at sunrise, drank my morning coffee without anyone hovering. But soon, I realized I missed something. Not the visits from Bennett and Piper. Those left me more tired than anything else. I missed real company. Laughter that didn't come with a price. Conversations that didn't end in veiled comments about money at the library. I saw a flyer for a local gardening club I went. And that's where I met Rowena. She was 73, had lived in Gulfport her whole life, and didn't suffer fools. She took one look at me and said, "You're not from here, but you're not lost either." Then, she handed me a coffee and listened like no one had in years. That was the start of everything changing. The first time I brought Lloyd to Sunday lunch, I wore a turquoise dress with a little floral print. Something Rowena had picked out from a shop near the library. She said it made me look like springtime. I wasn't sure what to expect from Piper, but the moment she opened the door, her eyes moved from the dress to my shoes, then back to my face. "You look youthful," she said finally, then turned and called for Iris. Bennett met us in the kitchen. He smiled at Lloyd, shook his hand, and introduced him as Mom's dance partner. Lloyd just nodded and said it was a pleasure to meet everyone. Iris hugged me, then asked how the garden club was going. She looked bright in her play costume, She was going to be Titania in her school's production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. We sat down to lunch. Piper had made chicken piccata with roasted vegetables and a lemon tart for dessert. She mostly stayed quiet during the meal, occasionally correcting Iris's grammar or reminding Bennett to pass the water pitcher when dessert was served. Bennett brought up the dancing again. "Mom's been going to lessons twice a week," he said, smiling. "Even some salsa, right?" I nodded. "Keeps my joints moving." Piper's fork paused midair. "And who do you dance with? Whoever's available?" I said lightly. "There are plenty of single men there." Piper and Bennett exchanged a look. "You should be careful," Bennett said. "I am," I replied. "I'm old enough to know when someone's not being genuine." Piper set down her fork. "Speaking of finances," she began, "have you thought about helping Bennett grow his business? Now would be a great time to invest, and you'd earn interest, plus the money stays in the family." Bennett opened his mouth but didn't say anything. I looked between them and said, "I'd think about it," even though I already knew the answer. After Iris went upstairs and Bennett disappeared into his home office, Piper asked if we could speak alone. I followed her into the living room. She sat on the edge of the couch, legs crossed perfectly. "Hazel," she began, "these hobbies of yours. They're fine, but maybe consider how they might look to others." I folded my hands in my lap. "What do you mean, dancing colorful dresses? Meeting men at your age, some might see it as inappropriate." I looked at her. "And if I am looking for company, what then?" She blinked. "I just think Edgar would be disappointed." I stood up. "You didn't know Edgar well, and he'd have wanted me to live, not sit in silence. He would have been happy for me." Piper didn't say anything for a moment, then tried again. "I just want what's best for the family's reputation." I turned toward the door. "Maybe what's best is letting people live the way they want to live." "On the walk home," I called Lloyd. He listened without interrupting. When I finished telling him about the conversation, he said, "You should wear the brightest dress you own this Friday, and we'll dance till our feet hurt." That Friday morning, I sat on the porch with Lloyd. We shared lemonade and looked over a travel brochure. "Shrimp Festival in Georgetown," he said. 3 days of dancing seafood fireworks. I know a guy with a place right on the water." 2 rooms, I asked. "Of course," he said gently. No pressure before I could pack for the trip. The phone rang. "It was Bennett, Mom," he said. "Are you free Friday night?" I hesitated. "Why Piper's birthday dinner? She wants you there. It's a big deal. We've made reservations at Azure Bay downtown." I'd heard of the place. Upscale, expensive waterfront seating. The kind of restaurant that made a point of polishing silver twice. "Who all is going?" I asked Piper's parents, her brother, and his wife. "Ise and you?" I didn't want to cancel the trip with Lloyd, but I said yes, anyway. That afternoon, I told Lloyd I wouldn't be going to Georgetown. He didn't say much, but I could hear the disappointment in his voice. "Family obligations," I explained. "I understand," he said. "But you deserve more than being everyone's afterthought." That night, Rowena caught me on the sidewalk just before I turned toward the restaurant. She had a picnic basket in hand and raised an eyebrow at my dress. "You look sharp," she said. "Who's paying for this birthday shindig?" I shrugged. "I assume Bennett is you." "Assume," she said. I told her about the conversation with Bennett, how he hadn't exactly said who was footing the bill, how Piper had acted like she was doing me a favor by inviting me. Rowena shook her head. "Hazel, you drop everything when they call, but they never lift a finger for you." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. "Just don't let them corner you again," she said as I walked away inside Azure Bay. The lights were low, the tablecloths white and starched, the kind of place where even the ice water comes with lemon slices. Piper's parents greeted me with stiff smiles. Her brother Bradley and his wife Kimberly were loud and cheerful. Iris sat quietly near the end of the table. Piper walked in, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my entire outfit. She smiled at me, but her eyes didn't match when the waiter handed out menus. I tried not to react to the prices. Piper ordered lobster. Her parents ordered steak. Bradley and Kimberly went for the seafood platter. I chose the goat cheese salad and grilled chicken. Hazel, Piper said sweetly. This is a celebration. Don't be shy. I'm watching my cholesterol, I said. Conversation drifted back to Lloyd again. So, how did you meet this fisherman? Bradley asked. Dance class? I replied. Is it serious? Piper's mother asked. He's a very kind man, I said. Kimberly smiled. Sounds lovely. Piper just raised her glass to family later as dessert was served. The waiter brought the bill in a leather folder. He handed it to Piper. She glanced at it, then smiled and passed it to me. Hazel, she said, Bennett told me you wanted to treat us as your gift. To me, wasn't that thoughtful? I looked down at the total over $2,000, including hundreds in wine. I looked at Bennett. He stared at his coffee cup. I never said I'd pay for this, I said quietly. But I thought, Piper began. No one told me, I said, and I won't be paying. I pushed the folder gently back across the table. Piper's smile faded. Her mother's expression stiffened. Bradley and Kimberly exchanged glances. I stood, thank you for the invitation, but this was not discussed, and I won't be manipulated. As I turned to leave, Piper's voice rose. Where do you think you're going? I stopped home. Piper, and if you're still hungry, you can pay for your own lobster. The whole restaurant had gone quiet, every eye on our table. I didn't look back. I woke up the next morning before the sun had fully climbed over the water. The air was still cool, the tide just beginning to shift outside my window. The phone rang before 7. The caller ID lit up with Bennett's name. We need to talk, he said. As soon as I answered, I sat up in bed, pulled the blanket across my lap. Good morning to you too. You left us with the check last night, he said. Do you think that was fair? I listened to his voice rising and falling, like it always did when he was trying not to sound angry. I didn't agree to pay for dinner. I said, you never asked me to. Neither did Piper. She thought you were offering it as a gift. He said she was hurt and embarrassed. No one told me that, I replied. I was invited as a guest. There was silence for a moment. Then he asked if I'd be willing to apologize to smooth things over. Just say you misunderstood. It would mean a lot to her. I closed my eyes and waited for the ache to pass. No, Bennett. I won't say something that isn't true. Why do you always make things more difficult than they need to be? He asked. It's not like you can't afford it. This isn't about the money, I said. It's about the way I was treated. You embarrassed us. He said, and now Piper's parents think we can't even afford a family dinner. Can you? I asked. He didn't answer. You let her invite everyone. I said you let her order bottles of wine and lobster. Then you expected me to pay for it all because... Why? Because I'm older, because I live alone, because you sold the house and kept the money. He said you never even asked us if we wanted it. You just sold it and left. I took a breath and steadied my voice. I sold a home that I owned and maintained for decades. I made sure you were raised. I put money aside for Iris. I worked hard every day of my life, and now you spend it on garden clubs and cruises, he muttered. Yes, I said, because I earned that right. His voice dropped. If you don't apologize to Piper, you won't hear from us again. And that includes Iris. I held the phone tighter. Don't do that, Bennett. Don't use your daughter like a pawn. She has nothing to do with this. You made this choice, he said. Not us. Then you'll have to live with it, I said quietly. Goodbye, Bennett. I ended the call and let the phone rest in my lap. My chest felt heavy. My eyes stung from the tears I'd been holding back since the restaurant. I spent most of the day in silence, wandering from room to room, picking up laundry that didn't need folding, adjusting photo frames on the mantel that didn't need straightening. In the late afternoon, I called Lloyd. Can you come over? I asked. I just need some company. An hour later, We sat on the porch, the breeze tugging gently at the wind chimes above us. I told him everything about the dinner, about the phone call that morning, about the threat to keep Iris away. He didn't say much, just listened, one hand resting gently over mine. "They know they can get to you through her," he said at last. "And if you cave now, they'll keep doing it. I just don't want to lose her." I said, "You won't." He said, "She's old enough to decide for herself. And from what you've told me, she already has." A soft knock came at the gate. Rowena stepped in, carrying a cloth-covered basket. "Blueberry muffins," she said. "I figured you could use 1 or 3. She settled into the chair beside me and looked between the two of us. "You were the talk of the garden club this morning," she said. Mrs. Patterson saw the whole thing from 2 tables over. "Said you handled yourself like a queen." I buried my face in my hands. "Well, the queen has now been banished," I muttered. Rowena reached over and patted my shoulder. "Bennett called?" she asked. "This morning?" I said. "He wants me to apologize, or I won't be allowed to see Iris again." Rowena sat back in her chair, arms folded. "And what exactly would you be apologizing for?" I didn't answer, Hazel. She said softly, "They've been walking over you for years. This was just the first time you said no, and now they're punishing you for it." I looked down at the muffin in my hand. "I just hate that. Iris is caught in the middle," I said. Rowena nodded. "She'll find her way back to you. Girls like her always do." Lloyd poured more lemonade for all 3 of us, "And while you're waiting," he said, "maybe you should think about what comes next." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Your will?" Rowena said, "You need to protect yourself, especially now that you've seen what they're willing to do for a check." I blinked at her. "I haven't changed anything since Edgar passed," I said. "Everything goes to Bennett by default. Maybe it's time to rethink that." Lloyd said, "You can still leave something for Iris, but make sure it's something Piper can't touch." I looked at the 2 of them, their faces steady and kind, their voices calm. "Do you know someone I can talk to?" I asked. Lloyd nodded. "I'll make a call tomorrow the next morning." He drove me to a small office in downtown Gulfport, the kind with dark paneled walls and a secretary who offered coffee the moment we stepped in. The attorney's name was Nathan Holliday. He looked to be in his 40s. Kind eyes, clean, desk-firm handshake. I told him everything from the move to the cottage to the dinner at Azure Bay to the phone call with Bennett. He took notes carefully, never interrupting when I finished. He looked at me. "You want to change your will, so your son and daughter-in-law aren't the primary heirs, but you'd like to set up something for your granddaughter. Is that right?" I nodded. "Absolutely doable," he said. "We can create a trust fund she can access when she turns 21 or enrolls in college. As for the rest, you can leave it to whomever you wish." I thought for a moment. "I'd like to leave the rest open for now," I said. "I need more time to decide." He nodded. "We'll start with the trust. The rest can be filled in later." As we left the office, I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not sadness. Something lighter, maybe even relief. Lloyd opened the car door for me, then climbed into the driver's side. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I looked out at the water, just visible beyond the rooftops. "Better," I said, "like I can breathe again." 3 days after visiting the lawyer, I stood in my kitchen holding a half-folded dish towel when it hit me just how quiet my house had become. I hadn't heard from Bennett since the call. He ended with goodbye. Mom. No apology, no second thought. No. Iris. The silence stretched into a week. I stayed busy. Rowena and I replanted the herb bed behind the shed. Lloyd took me to a nearby museum on Tuesday afternoon, just because they were offering free admission for seniors. We sat through a jazz set at the town square the next night. Still. Every evening, I came home hoping to see a missed call or voicemail from Iris. There was nothing. The following Sunday morning, I made coffee, then sat on the porch wrapped in a light cardigan. The garden was starting to bloom again. the lavender already pulling bees from the far fence. I had just settled into my chair when the phone rang. It was the attorney's office. "Mrs. Thornton," the assistant said, "your documents are ready. Mr. Holliday can meet you this afternoon to review everything for signature." "I'll be there," I told her. At 2:00 sharp, Lloyd and I walked into the same small office, the same dark paneling, same quiet hum of a desktop printer. Nathan greeted us with a calm smile and handed me a thin stack of printed pages. The trust for Iris came first, a clearly written agreement guaranteeing 4 years of tuition plus a modest living stipend accessible when she turned 21 or earlier if she enrolled in college full-time, then the amendment to the will. "You don't have to decide where the rest of the estate goes today," Nathan said, "but we need to name a temporary beneficiary or trustee for the remainder." For now, I looked over at Lloyd. He nodded once, Rowena or me. "Or both. Your call?" I reached for the pen and wrote both names in the box provided. Nathan notarized the documents while we waited, then handed me a copy in a paper folder. "It's all legal now," he said. "If you make any updates, just give us a call. We'll adjust the file right away." As we stepped back into the sunlight, Lloyd offered to take me for dinner again, but no more downtown restaurants with gold flakes in the dessert. He said, "I was thinking crab cakes at the pier place." We laughed. I said yes. We spent the evening sitting near the water, sharing a table under string lights, listening to a trio play, blues covers, and passing bites of buttery sweet corn and hush puppies back and forth on the drive home. I felt lighter, not entirely healed, but steady when we pulled up to my cottage. Lloyd walked me to the porch. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. "I am," I said. "I think I finally believe it, this time." He kissed my cheek, then turned toward his car, inside the house. I kicked off my shoes and started to reach for the hallway light when I noticed the blinking light on the answering machine. I pressed play. Iris's voice came through in a whisper. "Grandma, it's me." She paused. "Mom and Dad told me not to call you, but I wanted to say you didn't do anything wrong. I'll try again soon. I love you." I stood in the dark kitchen, listening to the click of the tape stopping and the silence that followed. I sat down at the table and let the tears come. Not heavy, not loud, just quiet, relief. 3 weeks later, Lloyd and I boarded a cruise ship for the Caribbean. We'd booked it months earlier, before the dinner at Azure, before the will, before any of it really. I almost canceled the trip, but he convinced me not to. "We don't know what'll happen next," he said. "But we've earned a little peace." The ship glided from the port in the early morning light, gulls wheeling in the air behind us, the Gulf sparkling beneath. We played cards in the lounge, drank coffee on the balcony, read books until the breeze tugged the pages sideways on our last night at sea. I stood on the top deck, watching the horizon turn from orange to deep blue. Lloyd came up behind me and put his arm around my shoulders. "You're thinking about Iris," he said. I nodded. "I haven't heard from her since the message," I said, "but I haven't tried to call her either. Maybe give it time," he said. "The next move doesn't always have to be yours." We disembarked in Gulfport on a Thursday morning. Rowena stood waiting near the dock with a bouquet of zinnias in one hand and a canvas tote in the other. "You're tanned," she said, "and you both look younger than when you left on the drive back." She filled us in on everything that had happened while we were gone. A new mayor, a proposal to expand the library, a bake sale that ended in minor scandal after someone's lemon bars were accused of being store-bought. But she didn't mention Bennett or Iris. Not once. I didn't ask that evening. Lloyd walked me back to my door. He carried my bag inside and set it gently by the hallway bench before he left. He kissed my forehead and said, "We're home now. No matter what comes next." I stood by the window long after his truck pulled away. The house was still the light soft across the kitchen floor, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid of what silence might bring. 2 days after we returned from the cruise, I walked downtown to pick up groceries. The morning was warm, the sky clear, and the sidewalks already filling with neighbors and tourists drifting toward the cafe or the waterfront. I stopped to buy peaches at the corner stand and was halfway to the park when I saw her. Iris. She sat at an outdoor table in front of the ice cream shop, a half-melted cone in hand, her backpack slung over the back of her chair. Beside her was another girl about her age laughing at something on her phone. I hesitated. I hadn't spoken to her since the whispered voicemail weeks ago. But then she looked up and saw me for a second. She froze. Then she smiled and stood quickly. "Grandma?" She crossed the sidewalk before I could even wave. "I didn't think I'd see you here," she said, and threw her arms around me. "I didn't think I'd see you either," I said, hugging her back. "How are you?" She looked older than she had before. The silence, her shoulders straighter, her voice more certain. "Can I walk with you?" she asked. I nodded. She said a quick goodbye to her friend, then joined me as we headed toward the park path, my grocery bag swinging between us. We didn't say much at first, then I asked, "How's school?" "Same," she said. "Tests, teachers, deadlines. Mom's been making me prep for the move so it's official." I asked Chicago. She nodded. Dad got a new position and Mom's excited. She keeps saying how much better it'll be there. I looked at her gently. "And how do you feel about it?" Iris kicked a pebble along the path. "I don't know. I mean, it'll be different. More opportunities, maybe. But I'm leaving everything. My school. My friends. You." I kept walking slowly, giving her space to keep going. "I told them I don't want to cut you off," she said. "They said I'm too young to understand everything. But I'm not blind, Grandma. I know what happened. I was there at that dinner. I saw it." I reached for her hand, and she let me take it. We walked in silence past the duck pond and the empty benches where Lloyd and I sometimes stopped on Sunday mornings. "I can still call, right?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "Anytime you want." She smiled. "And maybe visit, even if they're in Chicago. My door's always open," I said. "I'll remember that," she said. "I'm glad I saw you today." The next few weeks passed quietly. Summer stretched across Gulfport like a soft blanket, heat curling through the shutters. Each morning I baked more. Started sorting the attic, began organizing things I'd put off for years. But beneath that rhythm, something had changed. Iris was on my mind constantly. I hadn't heard from her since the park, but I knew her world was shifting around her then. On the morning of my birthday, I came downstairs to the smell of coffee already brewing. Lloyd had let himself in as he sometimes did, and stood at the counter holding a paper bag and a bouquet of roses. "Happy birthday, Hazel," he said, and kissed my cheek inside. The bag was a delicate silver bracelet, a small starfish charm at the center for the sea. "You never left behind," he said. Rowena came by just before noon, holding a round cake and a bottle of champagne. "Don't worry," she said. I baked it myself. This time, slowly, the backyard began to fill 2 neighbors from the street, a couple from the dance club, a few members from the garden circle, even the woman who worked at the library reference desk. We sat under the shade drinking lemonade and telling stories about the time Lloyd had tried to lead a tango with Rowena and ended up stepping into a flower bed. It wasn't a loud party, but it was a good one. I looked around at the people gathered and realized every one of them had chosen to be there. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, just to celebrate. We were about to slice the cake when the gate creaked. I turned and saw Iris standing on the path, cheeks pink from the sun, holding a small gift wrapped in bright paper. She walked straight to me and said, "Sorry I'm late." I opened the package. Slowly inside was a photo album covered in soft cloth, stitched with the words Grandma and me. When I flipped it open, the first picture was me, holding her, as a newborn. The rest followed in order: first steps, her kindergarten recital, a trip to the aquarium, a picture of us on the porch with mugs of hot cocoa, I scanned them from the old family albums, she said, then made the cover in my sewing class. I blinked against the tears that started to come. It's the best gift I've ever received, I said. Rowena waved her over and introduced her to the others. Soon Iris was laughing at one of Lloyd's stories and accepting a second slice of cake from one of the neighbors as the sun set and the last guests began to drift out. Iris came to stand beside me at the garden gate. I should go, she said. I told Mom I was going to the movies with Lisa. If I stay too long, they'll get suspicious. I nodded. Lloyd can take you home if you'd like. No, she said quickly. Better if I go alone? She hugged me tight. We're leaving in a few weeks, she said, but I'll keep calling and writing. And maybe I'll come back on school breaks. I'll find a way. I rested my hand on her cheek. I know you will. And remember, this is your home too. Before she turned down the street, she looked back. Once, I understand why you did it, she said at the restaurant. Everything that followed. I'm not mad. You had to. I'll always love you after she left. I walked back to the porch and sat beside Lloyd. Everything all right? He asked. I looked out over the quiet garden where the last of the candles flickered low. The next morning started like most others. The kettle on the stove, the sound of gulls overhead, the scent of rosemary drifting through the screen door from the garden. Then just after 10, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Rowena stood on the porch holding a folded piece of newspaper. She didn't wait to be invited in, just handed me the page. Read this. I took it and saw the headline halfway down the local column. Thornberry family to relocate as company transitions headquarters to Chicago. The article was short, just a few lines about Bennett's business expanding a new division, a move scheduled by end of summer. So it's happening, I said. Rowena nodded. They've already listed the house. Saw the sign yesterday on my walk. I sat down at the kitchen table, the article still in my hand. He didn't call, I said quietly. Not once. Not to say goodbye. Not to let me know? Rowena poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. He's not the same boy you raised, she said, and Piper's grip on him hasn't loosened. We didn't say much else later that day. I walked to the market to pick up eggs and flour. I took the longer way home, hoping the motion would help clear the tightness in my chest. When I reached the corner near the park, I paused by the ice cream shop where I'd last seen Iris. But the chairs were empty, the awning folded down against the midday sun. A week passed. No word. Then another. I kept busy lunches with Rowena, Sunday walks with Lloyd, tending the garden, picking out fall bulbs, even started cleaning out the hall closet. But each night, I found myself glancing at the phone. Nothing. Then one afternoon, I stepped out of the store balancing 2 paper bags, and nearly dropped one when I heard someone call my name. Grandma. I turned. Iris was jogging across the street, waving one hand and holding a book in the other. She looked taller again and more grown up in a way that hit me hard. I didn't think I'd catch you, she said. I've been walking this way for days, just in case. What are you doing here? I asked. I thought you'd be packing. She nodded. We are, but I've got a little time before we leave. Mom's busy with the moving company. Dad's been driving back and forth to the new office. We walked toward the bench near the playground and sat side by side. She placed the book in my lap. I wanted to give you something before we go, she said. It's one of my favorites. I thought you might like it too. I turned the cover. It was a worn copy of a young adult novel about a girl who finds a secret garden after losing her family. Thank you, I said. I'll read it this week. She pulled her knees up onto the bench and wrapped her arms around them. Things at home are weird, she said. Mom's excited, but also on edge. Dad's quiet, like all the time I waited. Sometimes they argue when they think I'm not listening, she added about money. The house sale. What to do once we're in Chicago. I placed the book gently in my bag. That's not your weight to carry, I said. I know, she said, but I still hear it. We sat there for a while. Then she looked over at me. You know the day at the restaurant, when I said all that stuff in front of everyone? I was scared they'd be mad at me later. Were they? I asked. She nodded. Mom gave me the silent treatment for 2 days. Dad barely spoke. But I don't regret it. I reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You were brave, I said. You spoke the truth when no one else would. She smiled. Then she stood up. I have to go, she said. But I'll write. I promise. And maybe next summer, if things settle, I can come visit. I'd love that, I said, as she started to walk away. She turned one last time. Grandma, I want you to know. You did the right thing. That night, with the will, with everything. I nodded, not trusting my voice to hold steady. After she left, I sat on that bench until the light started to shift. The book still tucked beside me. When I got home, there was a voicemail from Lloyd. He wanted to know if I felt like shrimp tacos. The Piers got a special tonight, he said, and you don't have to decide anything. Just say yes or no. I called him back and said yes. We spent the evening sitting outside the restaurant under a fading sky. The bay calm in the background. He didn't ask about Iris. But as we watched the boats return to the docks, he reached for my hand and held it quietly. And for the first time since the dinner at Azure, I let myself feel something close to peace. 3 weeks later, just before Labor Day, the for sale sign disappeared from the front lawn of Bennett and Piper's house. I noticed it while driving home from the library. The shutters were drawn, the driveway bare. They had left without a word, not a note, not a call. I parked in front of Rowena's to drop off a book she'd lent me and told her what I saw. You're sure they're gone? She asked. The curtains are different. I said, looks like someone new already moved in. Rowena nodded slowly. Then I suppose that's that. I didn't say anything that evening. Lloyd and I had dinner at his place. He made baked cod and roasted carrots and set the table with candles, even though it was just the two of us. We sat quietly most of the meal. Then, as he poured me another glass of water, he said, You look lighter tonight, like your shoulders finally let go of something I hadn't realized they had. The next afternoon, I spent time in the garden trimming back the zinnias that had grown leggy in the late summer heat. I was rinsing off my gloves at the spigot when I heard the sound of tires crunching gravel. A delivery van pulled up. The driver stepped out, holding a square envelope. Hazel Thornton, he asked. I wiped my hands on my apron and nodded. Signature. Please, he said, marked confidential from Chicago. I signed and took the envelope inside. The paper was thick, the handwriting careful. I recognized it instantly. It was Iris inside, was a letter, and a smaller sealed envelope labeled for later. I sat at the kitchen table and unfolded the page. Grandma? The letter began. I wanted to say goodbye in a way that Mom and Dad wouldn't stop me. We left fast. They didn't tell many people. I didn't get to call. She wrote about the drive to Chicago, how everything felt too big, too loud, how her new school was different and she missed the ocean already. Then near the end, she said, Dad's been quiet. He doesn't talk much when Mom's around. I think he's tired. She ended the letter with, I miss you. I'll write more soon. Love, Iris. I sat with it for a long time before opening the smaller envelope. Inside was a folded copy of a school essay titled, Someone Who Changed My Life. It began with my grandmother taught me how to stand up for myself. By standing up for herself. I pressed the pages flat and placed both envelopes in the small drawer beside the sink, where I kept things that mattered most. 2 days later, I got a call from Nathan Holliday Hazel. He said, "Just wanted to let you know the final trust paperwork was processed this week. Iris's fund is now active. We'll notify her when she turns 21 or if she enrolls early. Everything's in place." "Thank you," I said. He paused before hanging up. "You made a wise decision," he said. Not everyone has the clarity to follow through. After the call, I stepped out onto the back porch. The light was softer now, the sun setting a little earlier. Each evening, I sat with a blanket around my shoulders and watched a squirrel dart along the fence line. Rowena came by that weekend with a basket of fresh figs and a story about someone at the garden club confusing mint with basil again. We laughed at her imitation of the woman's expression. Later, after she left, I took out the photo album Iris had made and flipped through it page by page. There were a few new pages tucked in the back, not glued yet, snapshots of our birthday together. The garden party, her sitting at the edge of the porch with a slice of cake talking to one of the neighbors. I reached for a pen and wrote the date under the last picture in neat, careful script. It was the last time we were together before she moved, but somehow it didn't feel like an ending, more like a pause. The house was quiet the morning. After Iris's letter arrived, the kitchen held the scent of fresh coffee, and I moved slowly through the rooms, letting my hand rest on the worn banister and the bookshelf lined with paperbacks from so many years before. The garden was still damp with dew, the air sweet with the last of the summer roses. I stepped outside, wrapped in my old blue sweater, and stood for a while under the willow tree, sunlight flickering on the grass. There were moments in life when silence felt heavy, like something lost. But now, the quiet seemed different, more like peace. Lloyd arrived just after noon. He brought warm bread from the bakery and a jar of honey he found at the farmer's market. He set them on the table, and we shared lunch with the back door open to the breeze. Rowena joined us for coffee. She brought a bag of plums, and we talked about planting daffodils for the spring. There was no talk of the past, no mention of old wounds or empty chairs. Just the steady comfort of company that had chosen to stay that evening. I reread Iris's essay, her words gentle and steady, reminding me that the choices I'd made, however hard, had mattered to someone. There was sadness for what was gone, but also a soft pride in knowing I'd drawn a line for myself and kept it as dusk settled. Lloyd and I walked down to the beach, the tide low, the sand cool beneath our feet. He took my hand, and we stood watching the horizon together, neither of us speaking for a long time. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet act of standing up for your own dignity, even if no one applauds it. Sometimes all you can do is keep your door open and let love find its way back on its own time. And if you've ever had to draw that line for yourself or choose kindness even when it felt lonely, just know you're not alone. Leave me a comment and let me know if this story touched something in your own life. And remember to subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of resilience and quiet hope.